Okay, so my name is NAAMA GAFNI LIFSHITZ. I come from Israel, and I'm going to be talking today about 10 visualization tips to boost your effectiveness. So just a little bit about me. So I've been an Agile coach for the past 10 years. Been working for large organizations, but also in the past year and a half, working with startups, all kinds of sizes of organization, just trying to help them get better results and so on. I'm an industrial engineer, and I've also been, I'm a life coach, and I'm an NLP. NLP is a neuro-linguistic programming master practitioner. So some of the forward I will give is based on my knowledge from there. And also you can see my beautiful family. I've got 3 kids, and my husband, who is actually here in the audience. So, because when I, yeah. Because when I submitted the call for papers, I was like, you know, there is like this really cool conference I want to go to. It's called Agile Rock, but it's on our wedding anniversary, so how come we'll just like make a vacation out of it? And he kind of came, so thank you. Thank you. 13 years, it's a long time. And about this little guy here, he's about 9-year-old, and we'll have like a short story at the end. Okay? Sorry. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the why, okay? Because yesterday Alexei really requested that we will focus on the why. So, why visualization tips? So everything I will start here is kind of I have a story to tell for each slide, so bear with me. A while back, I started to work with a new client. And that new client had his problems as any other client. And a colleague of mine told me, oh, they really need you because you can get to do all your visualization stuff there. And I'm like, okay, I mean, all of us use Kanban boards or Scrum boards, right? We all have like these things in our bags at all times, right? Markers and Post-its and whatever. So why isn't that so special? Or maybe it's just me. Or maybe I'm just a bit more visual than other people. Or maybe I'm not more visual, but as visual as other people, but actually I've mastered some tricks to make that more effective. So I thought, okay, so I will try to collect like 10 tips on what makes visualization so effective. And we will start with a short experiment. Now, as you can see here, we have the agenda here. So we're at the why, and we will go to this travel to see the light at the end. Okay, so we will start with a short exercise. I'm going to give you, once my phone will open, okay. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to tell me what are the differences between these 2 houses. Not that easy, is it? It's okay, take your time, you still have 10 seconds to go. Okay, so time's up. Oh, sorry, cancel. Okay, how about now? If I give you 30 seconds to spot the difference, what would it be? You can sit there, but then you have a role. Yeah. Yeah, you can sit. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so when we look at that, actually, it's quite faster to spot the difference, right? And there is a reason for that. The reason for that is that it's the way our brain is actually wired. So we use visual communication at all times. We use symbols because, hey guys, please raise your hand if you live in a house that looks like that. Okay. Yeah, good for you. But most of us don't, but at least we all know this is a house. If I would have asked you just to paint a house or draw a house, you would probably draw something quite similar, although we are not living in such a house. Okay? So this is symbolization or generalization. So we take complex concepts, and then we kind of simplify them into a specific symbol that we all understand. Creates common understanding. Now, throughout the talks yesterday, it was very clear that most of us are working in the communication industry, right? I mean, what we are working is creating better communication between people. And what is best on that from actually doing it with the way our brain is wired for it. Okay, so this is one thing. So news of difference is very important because this is something that we are doing very fast because of the way our brain is created. And what helps us do that is also some submodalities in our visual analysis, okay? Is it close or far? Because, it's not my clicker. Bad clicker, okay. Is it far? Because when it's far, I say, okay, I'm still kind of safe, okay? If it's black and white, that means, okay, it's not very realistic, so maybe it's not true, it's not real. When I see that, okay, oh, I'm in trouble. And when I see that, I'm too late, okay? So this also creates some emotional reaction to it, an emotional signature. Now, the good thing about emotional signatures is that they make us remember better because we are wired to learn from these experiences. So what visualization can actually give you is fast news of difference and emotional reaction to things that makes you remember things better. So I will try to touch each and every one of these 3 things during my talk today. Okay, so let's start with tip number 1. How many of you have ever worked on setting prioritization for something? Okay. Yeah, keep your hands up. How many of you have a specific method for which you're using prioritization? Or you're just saying, okay, I think this is more prioritized than other. Great. So I always like also to start using, thank you, specific methods for that. Now, when we come to prioritize something, when I go to think about the communication in that process, I have so many different aspects of it. I mean, according to what do we prioritize, what are the criteria we are using, and so on. And what we want to have is actually a discussion within the grooming team or the product team to have common understanding so we can be faster about it. This is a story about a team. When I went to their first grooming session, they used TFS, which is like the brother of Jira, quite as bad as Jira, but let's put it aside. And then they were sitting in front of their user stories and just like drilling down into them. And in an hour, we were able to, this is such a spoiler. Okay. I will just put that aside and I will click it when I need it. Okay. And they were like talking for an hour and they were able to groom 2 topics. And they didn't talk about the full sprint content. So I told them, you know what, let's just drop this tool and let's start talking about what is important. So what I like to use when I start working with such teams is the screening model, which is by Mike Cohen. You can see it in his books and in his blog. And the model works like that. First of all, you list down all the backlog items or themes or whatever you would like to prioritize. Then you set the criteria. Now, visualizing the criteria and actually using these is a basis for discussion. Okay, what is important for us? One can be value for customer. One can be how urgent is that for us. One can be engineering complexity. It could be many things. And then once you do that, you create relative grading. Okay, so each backlog item is actually graded relatively to the other items on these specific criteria. And eventually, you get some sort of summary as a grade for it. Now, this is really nice and fancy, but the reality is a bit more ugly than that and actually looks like this, okay? Now, when we did that, we had several things that came up. So first of all, we got the discussion, yay. They actually got to get common understanding in 1 hour of according to what do we make decisions, which is really, really good. And then we had additional information that came out of it. Some things came very clear. For example, we have a couple of items that are so not ready, we were not even able to evaluate them. We have this item, which is really nice and important, but actually it has outside dependencies we were not thinking about. Okay, so just putting this on the wall made us very, very effective in making decisions and progress. Okay, so this is just one way. And I haven't said it in the beginning, but during this talk, I might be mentioning things that will look like, okay, they're trivial, we are already doing it. My objective in this talk is like to zoom in on the visualization and see how the things you are doing are helping you being more effective and giving you ideas to like promote that even more. Okay. So we're gonna go to tip number 2. Talking in the air. Okay, so our little car is driving. Talking in the air. Yesterday also in some of the sessions, they mentioned having big discussions and workshops, and I've been to many discussions where people are kind of talking around and having, like, for example, a design discussion or maybe a decision you need to make within the team. And you have introverts and extroverts, and someone is always dominating the discussion. So in this illustration, of course, this is not a real team. These two are kind of having a discussion. This one is looking like, I have no idea what she's talking about. This one looks like, you know, it's never going to work. But they're not really engaged in the discussion, right? And how many discussions have you been in where people are like talking and talking and talking, and then what? Wow, it's already been an hour. Okay, so you guys, we're out of time, so let's schedule another meeting for next week, and let's continue discussing that, right? So very, very simple, cheap tip. Talking in the air, draw it if you care. I mean, just take a whiteboard marker and start drawing, okay? We saw that in the case studies yesterday. It's very common practice we do, but when I go to a new client, in many cases, people are not that aware of having that option. And they're kind of stuck in the discussion. So just like put what you agree on the wall, and then you can start discussing your disagreements or your differences. Okay, so this is the point of visualization here. Now, another small tip, not a visualization one, but try to keep at least 3 options, because then you actually have a choice. Okay, but just putting things on the board just shortens the discussion and makes it more effective. Okay. Tip number 3. Before that, I have another slide. I keep forgetting that one. I take you back to the exercise we did. Okay, so when we have a visual symbol rather than a text or a verbal text, it's much faster for us to do that. Tip number 3 is about getting the right things done. You guys know pulp? I didn't touch it this time. Honestly, I didn't. Okay. You guys know Pulp Fiction? Okay. So this is the wolf, right? So this talk is about a team I had a few years ago, and they were really, I was actually standing out as a Scrum Master for a couple of weeks, and they were really low on motivation. And in that organization, they had a stabilization sprint at the end of the release. And the goal of a stabilization sprint is no development tasks, just like try to do system tests, solve a lot of bugs, and get the system stabilized. Well, it is a stabilization sprint. And when we started out the sprint, I was like, okay, what can I do here in order to see what they're actually working on and how they are progressing? So we started working with a new board. I took them into Post-its and colors and stuff. And at the end of the sprint, they were like, you know what? We had a really crappy sprint. We did not deliver. And I'm like, what? What are you saying? You delivered so much. I'm like, no, we did not deliver. So I thought, okay, let's talk to the board. Now here you can see the planning board. And this is like the actual board, how it looked when we were done. And what you can see here, this great spot, it's about 40 bugs they actually solved. And these are all the system tests they did. Yeah, they did some finishing on development tasks, but they did a lot of bug fixing. So they were real cleaners, right? They did really good things. They got shit done. And when I was able to see that, to show them this hotspots, okay, we were able to say, you know, guys, you're really good cleaners. And then I put on the Mr. Wolf video, and we discussed what makes them such good cleaners and what they can take and model from their behavior as cleaners to other aspects of their work. Okay, so I was taking something they were actually doing good in order to make it, to model it for other experiences. Now here again, very easy to do. Most of us have boards, and just try to see what the data gives you. And the news of difference is very easy to see because, wow, there is a lot of orange items here. Okay, so this is very easy to create something out of this data and get some additional insights. My next thing is how you can be using the statistics to adapt the logistics. I tried to rhyme. Sometimes it worked better than the other times. You know these guys that they say, that task, it takes 5 minutes, right? How many heard of you? You don't need to put a backlog item on that. It's 5 minutes. And then it takes 10 days, right? So I have a group like that, and specifically their manager is like, it doesn't take a lot of time. And they're really nice guys. I started working with them around May. And they're very special also because they are like 10 to 13 people in one team. They really insisted on remaining as one team. And we kind of working agile hybrid between Scrum and Kanban, just taking the best out of both. And they've been working on a cadence of 1 week planning. Okay, so they don't do a long-term planning, but every week they have a planning session, trying to finish things within the week, but not always very successful about that. But it's not like a sprint. Anyway, when we started that, I was a bit concerned, and I told them, you know what? Let's just try to measure your cycle time. Now, when you work with the digital tools like Jira and TFS, usually you get that for free, right? It's like in the system, in the workflow. But even if you need to collect them, it's really easy. You just need to log for each item what is the start date, when it was moved into in process, and then when it was done, okay? And the time that passed through that, not it's the duration that passed through that is actually your cycle time. So we collected that data, and then we put it on a scatter plot. Now, I don't know how many of you have used a scatter plot before? Okay, so this actually comes for free for most digital tools, but also it's very easy to prepare. It took 1 hour to prepare in Excel. So here we have the dates, and every column is actually 1 week, which in our case is a sprint or like a planning cadence, okay, because they plan every week. Here on this axis is actually the number of days. So if I take, for example, this item, it was finished on 14th of June, and it took 3 days. And this item was finished on the 21st of June, and it took 8 days. Okay, so this is how you read this. Every spot here is actually one item completed. And the location on the chart is how long did it take. Now, around beginning of July, we figured that, okay, let's have an experiment, and instead of a 5-day sprint, let's try to do a 7-day sprint, so a week and a half, okay? That didn't work that well, as you can see, because here we had some really short items. Here our cycle time was really blown up. So this information visualizes the assumption that if we make longer sprints, we actually can make more items done. But there was also a psychological effect that, we have more time, okay? Additional thing that happened here is that after this experiment and after running in Agile for a while, they were kind of ripening into like agreeing on having 2 teams. Both the manager and the people themselves said, okay, maybe it's time to split to 2 teams. Boom. So you can see here the amount of items. You don't need to know what items there were and what were the estimations of them, but you can actually see that they actually made more, which is great. Additional things we can draw from here is the median, which is the 50% line, and then the 80% line for predictability. Okay, so we often fail to use predictability elements based on data. And the median here is actually 5, so that means that only 50% of the items go through the system actually are 5 days or below. So trying to plan ahead for 1 week is great, but if most of your, half of your items are over 1 week, you need to align your expectations. Okay, and again, for also the 80% line is on 12 days, which is almost 3 sprints. Okay, so and that got us going in just like adjusting our process accordingly, okay, and adjusting our expectations. Now, this will be the only place where I use something that is not Post-its, but you know what? I love Post-its, really I do, but sometimes you need the hard data and you need to calculate that in additional tools. And that took 1 hour to prepare at one point after a couple of months of work, and then just every sprint add 10 minutes of work to see how things are going. Very easy to cheap, really easy to see the differences and make better decisions. Okay, making the bigger picture appealing. So, how many of you work with teams that are with products that are produced by more than one team? Okay, great. So we had a team, group of 3 teams that are working on one product. Unfortunately, there were also component teams, so that means that every feature actually had to go through 3 teams. And we worked in a quarterly release rate. And we wanted to see how we can get people more aligned and motivated on the entire product goals. Okay, so for those of you who are working with several teams working for the same product, in many cases we have a problem that people are very oriented on their own tasks. And if another team needs help, how can you get that working? And in many cases we try to solve it by creating a Scrum of Scrum or whatever. So of course we did. And the Scrum of Scrum was boring because it was like the bad daily that Angel mentioned yesterday, right? It's like, my team is doing that, and we're going to continue to do that, and we have no problems until at the end of the sprint when you have integration, and then, okay. So what we did, we thought, okay, so we were like it was in the last sprint of the release, and we're like, we're on a race. Okay, let's do a racetrack. So we created a racetrack, and each backlog item was actually a card, and each car had to go through the entire track to get to the trophy at the end. And we also added some gauges like green, yellow, red to see the progress of things. And the balloons are actually representing the number of days remaining till the end of the release. Okay, so every day in the morning we popped a balloon. Now this is in the hallway. So not only the people participating in Scrum, but everyone who was actually going to get some coffee sees that. Okay, so that made really nice. We had a lot of fun with that, and it made a good visibility, which is very effective and gets people interested and looking at it. It didn't work as a car race for a long time. Okay, we need to be creative again, and maybe sometimes we use superheroes or like specific cartoons, or we had a holiday season, so the holiday, like if you have something for Christmas or stuff like that. It was really good fun, and people actually enjoyed coming to this meeting and updating it, only because the way it looked. Now, yes, for sure we could have used a PowerPoint or a Jira board or whatever, but this is much more engaging. Very cheap. I mean, it's just carton board and like printed cars, right? Takes an hour to prepare. Tip number 6, challenging assumptions. You know, a while back, even before I went to university, I worked in a call center for FedEx, and we went like to this training for better call service, center service, and the guy there told us something I will always remember. when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Just like, okay, good visualization. But this is not one of that. So making assumptions is something we do all the time. Okay, I'm standing here assuming you know stuff. Okay, but if we would not make assumptions, we will not be able to progress. Okay, we will be in analysis paralysis kind of thing. So making assumptions is okay, but challenging assumptions is great. Okay, so just make sure you're aware of the assumptions you're making. Yesterday we heard several experiences with quarterly planning, PI planning, big room planning. I call it midterm planning, okay? So we try to plan ahead. I had a group of 12 teams working on the same product. So we did a quarterly planning. And one of the product owners, he had 2 teams in this group, he told us, you know what? I think my team is not delivering enough. I think we're going through all that trouble having this really big planning, and we invest so much time in it, and eventually I don't get what I'm asking for. I'm like, what? Okay, let's try that. So you're assuming that your team is not delivering. And you're assuming that the planning is actually what we planned is actually what we deliver. Let's check it out. Very easy. So we put on a board for the teams, and we put all the planned items with a yellow background. So all the yellow items you can see here are actually items that are planned in the quarterly planning. And then we had to add this board right next to it, which is out of scope, because during the actual life, things changed, which is okay. We embrace change, but we need to take some scope out. And then they started popping like mushrooms after the rain. These guys. So these guys are backlog items that were unplanned in the quarterly planning, but actually in reality they got into the sprints. Which again, not there is anything wrong with it, but it's just not something we planned in the quarterly planning. So we had 2 assumptions here. One is that the teams are not delivering. Now you could see, the teams were delivering. I mean, this sprint, they were really delivering stuff. It was just not what was planned ahead, but they were delivering, okay? So one assumption challenged. And the other thing was that we are a very big project. Now, this team is working on an already existing functionality within the product and just enhancing it. And this team is working on something extremely new, a lot of uncertainty from the customers or even in development. So the requirements are kind of emerging. So another assumptions we had and we eventually challenged was that sometimes the one process does not fit all teams. And then we need to adjust our planning techniques. So again, very cheap, very easy to see, very easy to fail. If in worst case, we just have only yellow post-its and say, okay, so now we have a different problem on our hands. Okay, so just experiment with this. One moment. Okay, it has a life of its own. Okay, so tip number 7, sticking to colors. I did not plan well the car thing. Okay. Okay. As you've seen, I am a colorful person. So when my customers, clients get me, they know they get me with all the post-its and the stuff. And I use it a lot. And a while back, a colleague of mine came to me and she told me, you know, I've been to many of your workshops and you keep insisting on for this, use that color, for that, use that color. And we kind of laugh about it, but now I really get it because I just came from a workshop from another team, which you're not working with. And they use the colors and the markers just like you do and the nice stickies to dot voting and all. But at the end, it was like a blur of really nice walls with colorful post-its, but it didn't have any insights coming out of it. What's your secret? And they're like, I don't know, never thought about it too much, but when I think about it, I start with end in mind, which means when I use post-its, I first of all think, what are the things I would like to see. So for example, if I do a retrospective with a team, I want to see the items to be improved and the items we actually were good at and the items we need to drop in different colors. Because when we cluster a topic that never comes up in retrospectives like quality, okay, so we need to see like the entire thing, like the entire picture. So if for quality we have good things and bad things, we want to see the entire thing. It has a life of its own, I tell you. I'm like there. Okay. Okay. And also, again, when I do a workshop, for example, and I have product team, engineering team, and people that are cross-functional, like managers and project managers and so on, and I want to see if the inputs for the transformation or for anything they want comes from the entire organization, I would give them different colors. So when I see a cluster of things that have different color on it, I know, okay, this comes from everyone. Okay, so same like I used for planned and unplanned tasks, same as I use for different tasks in the whiteboard. Okay, just play with it, but start with the end in mind and do not overdo it. Okay, because visual overflow is not effective, and we're trying to get the news of difference. We're trying to get more insights out of that. Okay. When I saw the presentation yesterday, I think the name was Work Fusion, right? For Eugenia, he did the presentation. And they had a really nice visualization they used. And I'm like, oh, maybe everybody knows this stuff. And I'm just like, going to talk about it for 45 minutes. But this is really important. Sometimes you have situations where you have many alternatives, or at least several alternatives, for things that are important for your organization or your product. Okay? One of them could be how you structure your teams or your organization. And when I was present in such a discussion in one of my customers, actually I was not supposed to be there, but I kind of was in the office, walked in, sat down, and they started talking about how they should structure their teams. Like, okay, good. So how are you going to do it? And they started talking, we should do this, we should do that, we should put that person with this person and that person with this person, and everything was in the air. Like, so talking in the air, draw it if you care. And of course, I took out some Post-its, and this is an illustration of what we did there. So this company had a .NET, which is the pink ones, .NET team. Okay, so this is a .NET team. This is a Java team. You can see Jane actually has both Java and .NET skills. You can see these are the automations. These are the manual QA. You can see, for example, there are different locations. So the Israel and just like other location. And this was like where they started. So I said, okay, so let's look at our options and say, okay, this is co-located teams. So these are the people we have in Israel. And these are the people we have in the other location. Okay, so let's see how that works. And then we can actually visualize our option and say, oh, you know what? This is a junior. This is a senior. It will not work together. We don't have any seniors there, okay? If you remember the slides, if you were in the session yesterday of all that, we need to get more people here because we need to recruit people because we're missing that skill. It comes very evident. Another option was, okay, let's take the product know-how and put them in like feature teams and see how we can sculpt that. And honestly, that took like 15 minutes to create, okay? And later on, of course, they had a lot of deep discussions, but at least the alternatives were clear, okay? The next tip is about clearing a mental fog. We are living in such a condensed world of information and tasks and opening a calendar and it looks like all these meetings and I need to do all this stuff. And specifically for people that used to work as team leads, for example, and now becoming Scrum Masters and like, what's going to happen to all my tasks that I did before? I mean, it's very scary to do that, right? So I had a really, really talented team leader, and she was very micromanaging. But once we started working in Agile, actually she did really good. I mean, she really stepped back, let the team experiment and fail. She was really doing a good job. However, she was still holding most of the technical know-how, and she was the best expert for that product. And another thing about her, which is kind of a minor thing, but she was 7 months pregnant. And she was about to leave for her maternity leave, and she was very, very concerned what will happen to all her tasks. And I told her, you know what, let's just clear that. I call it clearing. So let's just take all your tasks, write them on notes. And I think also Marcin said yesterday that once you write it, it's easier to talk about it. And just let's try to find out what you are doing. So just list all your tasks, and then we can see what we can do about them. So we did that. It was about a half an hour session. And this is, of course, a reproduction of that session. But I think this is mainly common for most of the people who are in specifically managerial positions, right, in the beginning of Agile. So I need to represent the teams in meetings and report to project manager and have visibility of the process and escalation and dependencies and coordination and resource management for the project. And I need to do also all the technical leadership, so code reviews, design topics, a lot of work with the product owner, technical mentoring. And of course, I'm a manager of some of these people, so I need to do their personal development stuff, one-on-one meeting, define KPIs, and so on. So we clustered them according to these kind of topics, and then has a life of its own. We were able to see how we can delegate them. So actually, she figured out on her own that a lot of these things, the team actually can do now. It was not obvious 2 months ago, but now it's obvious that the team actually can take that. So as for today, no preparations needed, just like move it to the team. Everything is okay. And there are some things we need to give to specific someone. So you have like 4 topics, you need to find someone that can replace you in that. And some will go to your manager. Okay, so again, this is a very, very simple thing, but it just kind of makes you see things clearly. Very fast, very easily, very cheap. Now, the last tip for today is actually using visual aids when you do something. Okay, so we're here. You're kind of my partners when I did that. Okay, so when I do that, I actually give some responsibility for this to you as well. So if like I'm here and you're like, oh, this is so boring, let's try to figure out what's on the way, you're able to see what's coming up. Okay, you can also use like a very simple agenda of to do in progress done and just like take the post-it and move it along as you progress, just like we do in a Scrum meeting. This helps you to manage the agenda, but also to give some responsibility to the participants. Because maybe as a participant in a workshop or a small meeting, I can see, okay, you know what? The item that is last is more important to me than the one we actually are going to do. And we are about to run out of time, okay? Because everybody can also see the time, okay? So let's make a decision if we want to continue this discussion or not. Using the clock also help us. This is a time timer, by the way. This is the name of that beautiful thing which I take everywhere. And when I say, okay, I'm in a meeting and I only have 5 minutes left, you know, this guy or girl that always keep insisting on having their mind spoken, okay, maybe if they see, okay, we only have 5 minutes, let's try to close this, it will be easier for you as a facilitator to do that. Okay, so I constantly use this as a method, and when I forget that at home, I have an application on my iPhone, which is really great. Another thing, which is, again, kind of obvious, but sometimes not used enough, is the parking lot. Okay, so if someone brings up something that is important to him or to her, but is not in the right context, okay, it's really important, I will just take it and put it here in the parking lot, and then when the end of the meeting, we will decide what to do with it. Okay, so just like really, really small things, to write down, to put on the wall, and then helps you to be more effective in your meeting. Makes you create a better and more better usage of the time. Now, I promised you a little story. Another one. Last one for today. So my 9-year-old, he's really addicted to something called Beyblade. Do you have Beyblade here? Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I've been struggling the past few days to think how I can explain what a Beyblade is. But it's kind of a thing that swirls, and you have like a launcher that you take out, and then it swirls even faster. And the kids, what they do is like each one of them is built out of 3 pieces, and then they try to crash them, okay? And whoever crashes last wins. I know, it's a kind of... But anyway, it costs a fortune, right? It's like 50 euro per really good one. It costs like 50 euro, right? And he comes to me and says, "Mommy, I need more." I'm like, "No, you don't." "Yes, I need more." I'm like, "No, you don't. We spend so much time, and your auntie brought you from the States, and grandpa and grandma, you have so many, you don't. "Yes, I do. I do not have enough." So, okay, enough talking. I will start showing. Okay, he needs more, right? What we did here is actually I showed him, this is all you have. These actually things you do not use because they are the cheap ones. Okay, so we just donated them. Some kids are really happy now. And these are the really expensive ones. And you kind of have like 500 euros sitting on the table at the moment. Okay, so I use visualization also for this kind of stuff because I can talk and talk forever, but sometimes you need to get some evidence. He didn't ask for Beyblades again. He just moved to Nerf guns, but this is another story. Okay, so just to summarize. So we have visualization helps us use the news of difference. Also create some emotional triggers to remember better. And remember, use your colors wisely because they can be a great benefit to you. That's it. Thank you very much.